Hello everyone, I am so glad to be here today that we are going to talk about a story in the Bible called Paul and Silas. Paul and Silas loved to go around and talk about stories about Jesus. And Paul had even written some letters to people, some Christians, telling about all the things that Jesus had done. And a lot of different people had read his letters. But one day, Paul and Silas was out telling other people about being Christians, and there were some people that heard them, and they did not like what they heard. And so do you know what they did? Paul and Silas was out, and they took Paul and Silas and put them in jail. They put them in jail, and when they put them in jail, they wanted to make sure that they stayed there. So they even put these heavy chains that went around Paul and Silas's feet. They put them together so they could not go anywhere. Can you imagine how heavy that was? I would not like to have to walk with chains on my feet. Just imagine how hard that was for them to walk. That would have probably made Miss Sarah very sad, and I would have probably not been happy. But do you know what? Paul and Silas were still so glad that they were able to talk about Jesus, that night when they were in prison, they were actually singing songs, and they were talking about how happy they were to be part of Jesus's ministry. They were praying to God and thanking them for all the things they had done. And do you know what happened while they were doing this? There was a big earthquake. Do you know what an earthquake is? I have never been in an earthquake, but an earthquake would mean that the earth, the ground, is actually shaking. And the earthquake was shaking so hard that it knocked the chains off of their feet. And guess what? The jailer who had been watching and was responsible for making sure everybody that was in prison, he came running. He was so afraid. He's like, I'm going to be in so much trouble because if the prisoners leave, I'll be in bad trouble. So he even took with him a light so that he could see really good when he was in there. And he is holding up the light, and guess who he sees? He sees Paul and Silas still in their cell. They could have run away because their chains are off their feet. But you know what, friends? They stayed. They stayed right there so that they could see him. And so the jailer was so surprised, he said, I can't believe y'all did this. Why would you not leave? And he said, well, Paul said we were in prison and we knew we weren't supposed to leave. And he was so surprised at what decision they had made that the jailer took Paul and Silas home with them. The jailer asked Paul and Silas to come home with them. And do you know what, friends? The jailer said, I want to know more about your God. I want you to tell me about Jesus and all the wonderful things that he can do. And so Paul and Silas did that. And friends, Paul and Silas was able to talk to the jailer and his family, and they all become believers of Jesus. It is a great story. We love to hear that story that Paul tells about that. Let's say our prayer and let's thank God for all the things that he does for us. Dear God, thank you that even if we're having a hard time, you are always there to listen to us, whether we're praying or whether we're singing. Thank you that you could always help Paul to be happy, even though he was in prison. Amen. That would be hard. I know that Miss Sarah would probably not be happy if I was in prison, but Paul was a great example of showing how to have joy even when you don't have good things going on in your life. Our Bible verse today is God gives us ears to hear and eyes to see, Proverbs 20:12. So just like in this story, you could hear Paul singing and praying with your ears. And the jailer even used a light so that he would be able to see, to use his eyes. Let's say our Bible verse one more time. God gave us ears to hear and eyes to see. Proverbs 20:12. Have a great week. Bye, friends.